No, don't place it like that, okay? Don't place it like on
boundary. Now we're talking about above ground level. We started using that a few years ago, so we can't really compare the two. So 5 to 10 feet above ground level is what's going to be at the shoreline plus the waves on top. There is another difference, of course, between Andrew and this storm, and that is, as you said, Andrew affected really one county very significantly, but this will affect perhaps all the Florida peninsula. So those who were in Broward County, for example, just to the north of Miami-Dade, who went through Andrew, they didn't have even more than tropical storm force winds. In this case, they could have category 2, 3, or even 4.
And Ed, when the eye, for those who are in areas where the eye passes over, how much do you know? If generally things are calmer when the eye is passing over, how long will people experience the eye for?
Depending again on if they go through the middle of it, then we're talking about a 30-mile wide eye and it's moving at 10 miles an hour. You could be in relatively calm for 3 hours. The problem is that immediately after you hit the backside eye wall, and the winds go from nothing to 150 miles an hour in just a few minutes. So again, this is not something that you can just put off and say, well, we'll ride it out here. You can't do that. You have to be in a well-fortified structure or out of the way completely.
Yeah, Ed, back in the 90s, I was caught on vacation in St. Bart's in a 3-day hurricane. And when the eye came, I thought the whole thing was over. And like an idiot, I was talking about, trying to make it to the airport and get out. And then I realized, actually, no, this is just the eye.
There's a history of that, too. And in fact, in South Florida, in Miami, 1926, a hurricane that was even bigger and about as strong as this came ashore. And the people went outside, went down to the water when the eye came over. And then the winds came in, the storm surge came in, and we lost many people because they weren't aware of that backside.
Yeah, good thing to keep in mind. Ed Rappaport, thank you, Tom Sater as well. It is one thing to see video of a Category 5 hurricane, quite another to actually stand up in that kind of wind or try to. Randy Kay got an idea of just what that is like in a safe way. She joins us now to tell us about it. So explain what you did, Randy.
Well, Anderson, we've seen you out there covering hurricanes and battling those massive winds, hanging onto a pole or maybe part of a building just to get through those winds. Well, I did it, as you said, in a much safer way. I went to Virginia Tech University, where they have a wind tunnel, and they can crank those wind speeds up to 190 miles per hour. We didn't go that high, but it was pretty tough to take. Here's a look. I am all attached to these cables. I'm in a harness for safety. And we are going to see here, I'm going to see personally what it's like to battle those winds, experience a tropical storm force winds. We're going to start to crank those winds up now. Then we're going to try and reach a Category 1, Category 2, maybe even a Category 3. We'll see. At some point, though, the winds are going to get so high that you're not going to be able to hear me speak, because I'm not going to be able to speak. So my producer, Nick Johnson, and William Davenport, who heads up this wind tunnel facility, will start to give you a little bit more of the narration of what I'm going through. I'm just going to hang on and see how long I can keep talking to you. Your mouth gets pretty dry. I can feel my jeans are already flapping a little bit at the bottom. I'm just going to sit back and hold on. The wind can be so strong against your chest that at some point it's going to feel like you can't breathe. I feel right now like the wind is going up my jeans. It's getting a lot stronger. The next thing we'll hit will be a Category 1. That'll be about 80 miles per hour. I'm just going to sort of put my head down into it. It's real loud in here, too, so I'm going to stop talking.
So, William, obviously Randy is in some pretty strong winds right now. What category is she at?
So she just hit Category 1.
So, just to be clear, the wind speed that she's experiencing right now...
Right now, we're just passing through 80 miles an hour.
So, if somebody is actually there on the ground feeling these kind of winds, what's going on?
They are holding on for dear life. The force on Randy right now is up to 150 pounds, and it's very hard to stand up with that kind of pressure on it.
So she wasn't actually wearing a harness?
Yes, she would not be able to stay still in the tunnel there unless she were to lie down.
So I see you have a tablet here. We're still monitoring it. Where is she at now?
She's at 115 miles per hour, so she's reached Category 3.
Category 3?
Yeah, force on her body's about 220 pounds.
So can anyone at this point stand?
You'd have to be in a very low crouch, and you'd have to be very strong.
Randy, what did that feel like?
Well, Anderson, we got up in the end before it was over to 123 miles per hour, and it was really hard. You saw me probably shake my head there at the end. That was my signal to the guys to bring the wind speed down, but my cheeks were flapping, the skin on my neck was vibrating, and the skin on my arms was flapping in the wind. And as I mentioned in that, it's really hard to breathe. So luckily I was in the chains that they were holding me with, and I was able to just sort of lean into it because that took the weight off your chest. It felt like there was, a brick on your chest, or you were just up against a brick wall. It was very hard to breathe out.
Yeah.
And as I also mentioned, it was really loud in there. I had earplugs in, and it got really cold. It got in the low 50s once that wind kicked up. So it was pretty tough. And I'll tell you, those speeds, as you know, they're no joke, Anderson.
Yeah, and that's not even up to a Cat 4, Cat 5. Randy, thanks for doing that. I appreciate it. Much more ahead, including the head of emergency management for the Bahamas and what they are doing to save lives. Also, new details on the Russia probe. What investigators want to know about Donald Trump Jr.'s meeting with a Russian lobby.
The 8 p.m. advisory had winds at 175 miles per hour. Now, yes, this is a little bit weaker than yesterday, but generally speaking, this is just mainly still a massive Category 5 hurricane. Barreling off to the northwest at 16 miles per hour. That eye rolling through the Turks and Caicos right now, and will continue on that northwesterly path through the end of this week, it looks like. So on our track, it's looked generally like this for a few days now to the north and west. It's been that northerly turn, which the models have been kind of debating about how soon it will take this. And the 5 p.m. track did shift a little bit farther west, which is unfortunately not the best for the Tampa Bay area. Currently, some of our models, the European, did have it tracking up more of the center of the state, and that would also affect more people in general, which is also not great news. So Sunday at 2 p.m., winds at 135 miles per hour. Still south of us, we would likely feel the effects later in the day, Sunday and into Monday. The good news is, though, notice by 2 p.m. Monday, it's moving out of Florida. So this is going to be a very quick moving storm, which is good news because you saw what Harvey did when it just sat over Texas a couple of weeks ago. So this is a completely different situation. As far as winds go, this is completely dependent upon the track. So this is a look at the GFS model. You can see on Saturday, it's going to be a breezy day, northeast winds for us. And then as we head into Sunday, this is when our winds will really start to pick up. This is Sunday at 6 p.m. You can see strong tropical storm force winds across the Tampa Bay area. And as we head more into our inland spots, Highland, Polk County, maybe even approaching hurricane strength winds, depending on the exact track. Of course, if it's farther to the east, our winds will be lighter. Farther west, then we have more of the bulk and the heart of the storm rolling through. Heading into Tuesday, though, things really quiet down. We are back to normal here in the Tampa Bay area. As far as rainfall totals are concerned, here's a look also using the GFS model. We head into Saturday and then into Sunday and then into Monday as well. And you can see especially where this storm would be closer to potentially making landfall, the higher amounts, but ranging 3 to 7 inches. Don't look at the exact numbers, though, because this ultimately just depends on the track of the storm, how much rain we'll see here in the Tampa Bay area. Not expecting much in the way of surge because we're generally still going to be on the western side of that system. But yes, heavier rain if it does track a little bit farther west. The effects begin Sunday and then move out by late Monday. Guys?
Very intense, Category 5, very close to Grand Turk. If you've ever been there on a cruise or vacation, it is getting hammered right now. 650 miles from South Florida. The new track update based more on the European guidance, which has shifted west since 2 o'clock this afternoon. You see a very powerful Category 4 still headed right for South Florida. That would put Miami and the entire core of 6 million residents down there on the right-hand side, potentially, of this storm. That is the bad side to be on. What is new is that from Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock all the way up until, there are really only 2 circles. They put 1 circle here when they draw this out, the Hurricane Center, 1 circle there. We just kind of put a line in between the 2. But this will likely weaken by the time it gets to Orlando, but could still have winds over 100 miles an hour, okay? It just really depends on how much it weakens over the Everglades. Very warm water down here may sustain major hurricane status as it approaches southern parts of our coverage area. So the bottom line is it can still shift farther offshore. It can still go farther farther to the west, but this track puts a lot more of central Florida in the path of the winds from this storm. So the first outer rain bands will start arriving late Saturday. We need you hunkered down and ready to go by 5 p.m. Saturday, because Sunday, that's when the worst weather will start to move in, especially Sunday night, overnight, and the first part of Monday. Greg?
All right, Tom. And tonight, at least 10 people are dead after Irma moved across islands in the...
Well, just a few minor changes. Again, what we have is still a formidable Hurricane Wolf, no doubt. We're losing time now because those that have to evacuate have got to do it by tomorrow morning if they're going to do this. Now, I will show you a significant change, at least 20, 30 miles when it comes to the track towards Miami, which could be significant for Miami and everyone. Monroe County, Miami-Dade, and elsewhere. We're now watching the storm surge start to plow into the Turks and Caicos. That's why they were evacuated, looking at least 15 to even possibly 20 feet or more in some areas. The warnings extend across the Bahama Islands, but this is new today, and this wolf is significant. These watches posted by the National Hurricane are not just slapped up on the U.S. without considerable discussion and analysis of the data. It costs millions and millions of dollars to place a hurricane watch somewhere in the U.S. because of the federal, state, the local need, the equipment, the personnel, and the evacuation process that's taking place, and of course closing of businesses and so on and so forth. This will become a warning as time rolls on. We will see more watches extended up the East Coast and the West Coast because, again, keep in mind, this storm is so large, once it makes its way to the southern tip of Florida, the entire peninsula will be covered with tropical storm force winds. I want to point out here the tracks. A couple of them still deviate down to the south over Cuba. Almost ready to kind of erase that, but we cannot knock that possibility out. But again, the spaghetti plots are different than the European and the U.S. model. So we look at all of them. And again, we continue to see quite an array and focus along that East Coast. The difference in the track from the National Hurricane Center from yesterday to today is quite interesting. But for planning purposes, I just want everybody to look at these color codes. This is when the tropical storm force winds meet your area. You do not want to leave on Saturday driving through Florida with tropical storm force winds. So you at least want to leave, I'd say at the very latest, if you're even considering, it's Friday morning. But everybody needs to consider this. Here's why. The path now shifting back westward. 24 hours ago, we saw a 60 to 70 mile shift to the east, and now it looks like it's shifting. Even though it may be just 20 miles, it puts Miami right in the worst possible position. Because when you look at the formidable storm, the strongest winds, the strongest storm surge, the bands of heavy rain are always in that northeastern quadrant. So as the system stays more just toward, I would say, just to the west of Miami, then they're putting Miami and the millions of people even northward in that range. As we continue to go along, let's take a look at the European model and the U.S. There have been some changes with this as well. They have all shifted a little bit westward. Yesterday, the U.S. model was a little bit more off the coastline, and it still is. And it still brings it up toward landfall near Savannah. That's still a very big possibility. So everyone on alert on, of course, the other coast of the Carolinas and Georgia. But for the European, a week ago, last Thursday, this model was still south of Miami, and here it is again today. So you've got to take that in consideration, that this graph it has on the environment. If we get in closer and take a look at each one, it is quite interesting, and this is probably the worst case scenario, although there's going to be suffering anywhere. So there isn't a great outcome any way you look at it. But again, with those stronger winds, as this moves in toward Key Largo, this is our problem spot. For the strongest winds, the greatest storm surge, that could be, and I think it's conservative to say 10 feet, really. I mean, we could see 15. Turks and Caicos are getting 20. It depends a lot on that slope of the ocean floor. But again, this is going to be a problem. This is going to be like winds near the center of an EF3 tornado. And we know what that does when it hits any community in the Southern Plains or anywhere in the U.S. But consider those kind of winds around that center of the eye, hour after hour after hour, all the way from the south to the north, straight up the center of Florida. The other model, of course, we're going to be watching is the U.S. model. But again, as the European moves in,